I see some familiar faces in here, so a lot of you know me, but my name's Alicia. I'm a developer advocate at Google, and I'm here today to talk about data analysis with, now my phone's gonna come on every time I say Google, about data analysis with G Suite and GCP. So a lot of people kind of work in G Suite, a lot of people work in GCP, but sometimes working with them together hasn't been kind of the norm. And when I came into this world, I was a huge G Suite user and had just started to see some of the products in GCP, and I really thought they would be super useful to G Suite users. You can actually use them together. And the G Suite developer platform makes that pretty easily and possible. So today I am going to do a quick intro to the G Suite developer platform, but I'm going to do a somewhat summarized version from this morning for those who came to the AppScript workshop. I'm going to talk about AppScript because it's what I use in my solutions, and then I'm going to show you a couple of demos and walk through them. And if you have questions about the demos, feel free to raise your hand. I'm just going to be, working in them and kind of showing you some of the code and how things work. And then obviously I can answer any questions. I have like a third demo. I don't think I'll have time for it, but we'll see. So I have 2 to 3 demos. So building on G Suite, a lot of people don't know, but you can build on G Suite. It's an extensible platform, a platform you can integrate with. You can use it to go out and get data from other sources, bring it into G Suite. You can use it to take G Suite data into other sources as well. It's a great opportunity to customize the environment that you're already in. And at least with AppScript, it's a pretty easy to use technology because it's based on JavaScript, and a lot of people already have JavaScript skills, or they're easier to pick up because there's a lot of great learning materials and information out there. So there's 2 main technologies that make up the platform. There's AppScript, which is a serverless scripting language, and then there's the APIs. So the APIs, I'll start talking about those a little bit. They allow you to interact with G Suite. This might be something you would use to get your G Suite data out of G Suite into another product. Say if you wanted to download all of your Gmail messages to analyze them somewhere else, or if you had a product that you wanted to integrate with G Suite, so having some sort of export to a Google Doc button in your product or to a Google Sheet. These are things that we have libraries for many languages to use the APIs, and a lot of professional developers use those to interact with G Suite. I really love AppScript. It's really good for the customization and extensibility side of G Suite. So you can add in new features and functionality that doesn't already exist in your G Suite environment. A couple things on this list that I actually used in the demos I'll show you today is you can set automations using triggers, and if people have used kind of Cloud Functions or other type of trigger, serverless triggers, what's cool about these are they are based on activities specific to G Suite. So things that happen, when you open a document or when you edit a document, that can kick off a script. So it's really cool, the triggers, and then also we're adding logic to doc sheets and slides and forms. So I do a lot of automation within Google Sheets, and so you'll see some of that as well. But you can build add-ons, which are sidebars that have added functionality in the editors, and there's a lot you can do. So what AppScript looks like is it's a scripting language, like I said, based on JavaScript. It has a bunch of enhancements that make it work across Google products, not just within G Suite, but actually extends to other products as well, like Maps and also BigQuery, for example. There are built-in and advanced services within AppScript that allow you to talk to those services without dealing with authentication. It's completely serverless. It runs in on Google servers. You edit the code in your browser, and an example here just shows you that you can access all sorts of different services like the spreadsheet service, the map service that can do things like create maps or measure distances, and the mail service, which can send email on your behalf. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is bringing natural language processing into Sheets. So I know Sheets, like a lot of people think of kind of quantitative data in there and numbers, but actually a lot of people end up with text data in spreadsheets as well. I think a really common use case that I experienced as a program manager at Google, somebody that was kind of building programs and processes and asking people like, what their feedback was I would end up with, a spreadsheet with a lot of data that was the back end of a form. Whether or not you use a Google form to collect data, a lot of times the feedback data does end up in a spreadsheet of some sort. There's a lot of different types of feedback that you might collect. A lot of people have kind of like 1 to 5, how satisfied are you? Or, multiple choice questions. But I think if you've gotten feedback forms online lately, you might see that there's always kind of this open response box. And I think, if you have a radio dial or a multiple choice, you can easily kind of create charts and graphs out of that. But this open-ended response, you end up having to manually review. So that's a terrible process after a certain period of time. So I thought, what can we do with natural language processing in a sheet? So Google has a service called Cloud Natural Language. It's part of GCP. Has anyone used the product or heard about Cloud Natural Language?
CPI.
Yeah. So it has so many things it can do. I think that's the hardest part sometimes about our machine learning APIs is each one has all sorts of features. Cloud Natural Language in particular, basically the input is some sort of block of text. And the things it can do with that block of text is it can extract entities from the text, so nouns and objects. It can detect sentiment of a block of text, whether positive or negative. It can create diagrams, sentence diagrams, analyzing the text and all the different parts of speech in there. And it can also classify content, take a block of text and put it into kind of a bucket. When I was thinking about bringing in feedback, I kind of started looking at data sets because unfortunately I can't use actual feedback from my projects at Google, but I thought about vacation rental properties because when you're looking for a hotel or you're looking for a vacation rental, I'm kind of analysis paralysis, but I always read through most all of the reviews, and there's certain things actually that I look for, like noise or location or things like that, what people think about that. So there's a really cool method in Cloud Natural Language that if you pass it a block of text, it will do kind of 2 of the things I talked about. So it'll pull out the entities, and it will assign a sentiment to each of those entities. So instead of just saying like, oh, this whole block of text was kind of positive, it can actually say neighborhood was mentioned in a likely positive way and transportation in a negative way. And so I wanted to, if you can imagine, for one block of text, it can pull those entities out. Now, if I do that over hundreds or thousands, there's going to be people that talk about the same entities, and you can see, like what's talked about the most. Is it positive? Is it negative? And it kind of can give a structure and some, a way to look at that data quantitatively. So right now I have a form. I'm going to say forms is amazing for prototyping, and I definitely recommend it. I know even on my team, somebody kind of used a form to start a process and then is now building a web app to really kind of like, scale it. But it's a great way to start out. And for this case, I am feeding all of my data through a Google form. A form can be backed by a sheet, which I always do because I love analyzing data. And I just need to talk to Cloud Natural Language from a sheet, which is what AppScript is for. So I think I'm going to go ahead and go into the app. This is my Google form, so I spent a lot of time on it, as you can tell, because I basically am collecting just who's filling out the form, which property I collected. I have 2, in my virtual world, I have 2 properties, and when they stayed at the property and what their comments are. So as you can see on the back end of the form, I get all of these responses, but the built-in analytics don't really tell me much. Like I can see how many responses I got for each property and what days they stayed there, but you know, otherwise I just have blocks of text. So what I'm going to do over here is kind of prepare my data to send it over to Cloud Natural Language. This is the back end of my form. So when you have a form and you get a response, it also pastes it into this tab here with the form icon. Now, I hate messing with this tab. Has anybody used Google Forms before? Have you like changed the form and then all of a sudden crazy stuff happens on this tab? Yeah, I call this like no man's land. I don't mess with this tab. So what I like to do is duplicate my data onto another tab. And it sounds like a really manual process, but I can actually use AppScript to make that automatic. So I'm going to show you the code that does that. Tools Script Editor. If you haven't been in AppScript before, that's how you get to the script editor for a Google Sheet. And I have my pre-processing script here. So this is some AppScript that basically takes, anytime a form is submitted, that can be a trigger. That's one of those automatic triggers. So I'm going to run this every time a form is submitted. I get this, this event object, which contains all the data of what happened when that form was submitted, what the questions and answers were, at what time they answered them. And I'm actually just going to copy all those values into a new sheet. So that way, whenever somebody fills out the form, automatically it will get copied over. And then I have a couple extra columns here that I wanted to add. Basically, I want to detect if the comments are in English, and then I'm going to change any non-English comments to English. And these are actually built-in functions, so detect language and Google Translate are built-in functions in Google Sheets. But I'm going to automatically paste, oh my gosh. I'm going to automatically paste those formulas in here. So I don't actually have to drag anything down or use array formulas. It's all just going to automatically copy and paste. So I'm going to set a trigger. So then I want it to actually trigger whenever someone submits a form. So there's a way to set up your triggers. I have it already set up here, but I basically point at which function I want to run, and then what event source, what event type I want it to run on, so that's on a form submit. So now if I submit some form responses, we should start to see data come into not just the form responses sheet, but also this review data tab. So I have a little function that will run that, because I have some sample responses. I have 8 people standing by, ready to submit a form. This is also an app script that I wrote to do this. But so you see they start to come in. They're coming in here, and they're pasting in here. They're not working very well today. That's the demo. The demo. I'm not even, I've never seen that before. But anyway, we are getting something. Oh, maybe I think I might have 2 triggers. I don't know though, I just ran this. Anyway, I'm gonna look into that later, but we did get a lot of new responses, and it did paste, you know, the 2 formulas in here as well. So I think it started up here with, let's see, where did we start to get our doubles here? So we have our responses and our formulas. Now, this final column here, entity sentiment, is basically a column I added to flag, like, when have I sent it to Cloud Natural Language and gotten the analysis back from that API? So these I have not sent yet. I'm actually going to delete, I don't think actually it'll affect it, so that'll be fine. I don't need to delete it because of the code. But now I need to send these new responses to Cloud Natural Language. Now, in real life, if I was running a program, I would probably have this next function set on a time trigger. So maybe once a day, it would just go through and run any new responses through Cloud Natural Language. based on kind of how many responses I'm getting, I could have that time to be, more often or less often. But here I wanted to show it in real time, so I'm gonna start it manually, but let's look at the function. The app script here, I wanna show you really kind of where the magic happens. It's not that many lines of code, and this is what really is connecting Google Sheets to Cloud Natural Language. So this function here, retrieve entity sentiment, all it does is take in that block of text, which is what Cloud Natural Language wants. It packages it up with just some parameters that the API expects to receive, like what language is it in. It sends it to the API endpoint, and it does this through a method called URL fetch. So it just goes out to the API endpoint. I'm using an API key here, which is basically kind of like my credit card authentication over to an account I have with GCP. That's in case I go over the free tier of how many calls I can make to Cloud Natural Language. And then I get the response back, which is going to be all of the different entities and scores. So in order to do that over every new line, every line that has not been processed, every comment, I basically have another function here that says mark entity sentiment. And really what happens is I go through each row, I identify any row that has something in the comments column, but does not have a complete flag. And then for that, I call the retrieve entity sentiment function, and then I take everything that I get back from the API, and I copy and paste all of those different entities into a new spreadsheet, and then I mark it as complete. So to see that happen, get over here onto this is going to be a little bit different, but here's like my first review that we haven't processed. So let's see, I don't think this should affect it running, but I'll press mark entities and sentiment, and this is actually just a menu that's starting it, so you'll see complete here, and then you should, I made it faster, so I used to have it running a little slower, and now it's done. So, but you'll see that the timestamp on all of these after Annie, these are the new values I got in. So for Helani's review, there's several entities. She had a pretty long review, and for each of them, I have a sentiment score, sentiment magnitude, which is kind of it's the strength of the sentiment, regardless of whether it was positive or negative. Normally, this makes more sense in like a large block of text where it's analyzing like full bodies of text. It kind of stays pretty small because it's just analyzing that one entity, and then how many times it's mentioned, and salience is importance of that entity within the block of text. So now I started with, I actually had about 700 or 800 reviews, and now I have almost 10,000 different entities and sentiment scores, and I have, some sort of quantitative way I can start to look at them. I think that was all I wanted to mention for this step. Let me see. I might think of something later, we'll see. So, in the end, I'm going to want to visualize that data, and Google Sheets, actually if I took that spreadsheet, and I have a demo online, make a pivot table off of it, create a scatter plot, you can start to see really quickly what's talked about the most, positively, negatively. But if you want something a little bit more polished, if it's something you're going to keep as a dashboard over time, Data Studio is great because it integrates directly with Google Sheets. So if you haven't seen Data Studio before, it's a data visualization product. It connects with a lot of our GCP products and Google Sheets just with a click of a button. You can use templates or actually tools to make really nice visualizations, especially if you're reporting up to people that need to see impressive dashboards. It's great for that. And then in a company that uses G Suite, it's really easy to share. It's just like a Google Drive file. But what's also great is you can embed these, and we've done this before on our blog, is you can embed them as an interactive iframe. So I could create a public dashboard, put it on a website, and anybody can drill down into the numbers with filters and things that I put on the dashboard. So I have the Data Studio. You get to Data Studio at datastudio.google.com. I can quickly create a new report, and just to show you how you connect to the data, you can create a new data source from Google Sheets. And then I have my, I don't know if you can see this very well, but I have my entity sentiment data, which is that 10,000 rows that I can connect to. And what I also like about using Data Studio is if you're used to kind of adding new columns and sheets and then having to copy down the formula, this is really nice because you can just add a new calculated field, like a lowercase version of my entities with just adding here, and then you don't have to add those directly to your sheet. I can add this to my report, and then I can start to make, there's a little bit of a learning curve in that if you're used to making charts and sheets, it's a little bit different here. But I will add a scatter plot. This is what I could have done with a pivot table, but I will do it. I'll look at my entity. How many times it's mentioned. And sentiment score. So I'm going to look at the average sentiment score. And I'm going to add the labels so that I can see what they are. So then I can see things that are mentioned most often here on, towards the right. So number of mentions goes up to 500. Things that are mentioned on average positively above the x-axis and negatively below. So Ravi and Sean are actually the hosts. So like when people on Airbnb stay there, they mention, the host quite often because of the community aspect. You can see things like parking, bathroom, kind of on the negative side. So you can see here, like a snapshot across all the reviews, what people talked about and in what way on average. But you could make a much more polished graph with like that report with a little bit more time, where I can see, how many submissions I get monthly. Here's that scatter plot that I made. And then on the right-hand side, I have kind of like which entities are mentioned most positively and which are mentioned most negatively. And there we go. It was refreshing. And then I could drill down even into like a specific entity, see, how many, for each mention, what was the sentiment score, or like over time, what is the sentiment score? And then I could even join that data back with the original review and be able to read, all the reviews that mention that entity. And that actually, I know it looks like I spent days on this. It's still not that amazing. But it actually didn't take that much time to do this. And now, when anybody fills out the form, it's going to automatically pick up that data and keep adding to it. So something about adding natural language to sheets. And if you want to, so Cloud Natural Language, I should mention, this is a pre-trained model. So it's trained on, like the web and kind of certain things that you would probably interact with in daily life, and you would see kind of, more generic speech. If you have very specific domain-specific terms and knowledge, there's actually a way to customize this sentiment analysis through AutoML. So you can kind of take the baseline model that's available in Natural Language API, train it on some of your own data, and then using the same app script, you can actually then predict on your own AutoML model. So if you want to try out the Natural Language API and see if what you get back from it, actually maybe it's more fun to look at like a real review. So I can copy and paste my own data into this try it page on cloud.google.com. Press try the API, and it'll see for all those things I talked about earlier, entities, sentiment analysis, syntax and categories, what type of data you could get back. So I suggest, if you're interested in using this, trying it out with your own data in the browser, seeing if it's useful, and then maybe going to the work of getting the code already. All right. So, yeah, like I said, you can still collect all that amazing information. You can turn it into numbers if you need to for the executives. And it's really just much more consistent and scalable than trying to ask, like 15 people to read through all the reviews. I use Cloud Natural Language. I know that spreadsheets aren't used for everything, but I actually have a sticker on my laptop that disagrees. There's not just the natural language API, there's translation, the AutoML versions of translation, natural language vision. I've done some cool things where like I have links or images in a spreadsheet, and then I can pull out what's in those images. So you could do the same type of thing with AppScript from a spreadsheet, or even from Google Drive. If you wanted an AppScript to go through all of the images in a Google Drive folder and label them, you could use AppScript with the Vision API, for example. So I think it's fun to think about how you could kind of, with the similar structure of AppScript, go and do different things in G Suite, utilizing the different ML APIs and AutoML products. All right. So the next one I want to talk about is not machine learning focused, but big data focused. And I think when people see, spreadsheets, they probably don't think big data, especially, a Google Sheet I think can have 5 million cells at this point. But what's great about Sheets is we're starting to do more and more integration between Sheets and BigQuery. So how many of you have used BigQuery or heard about BigQuery? A couple. So it's a data warehouse. It's, it handles a much bigger scale of data from Google Sheets. It's also just something where, your data at your company just might live there too. It might be the data warehouse where your data is already at. You can use standard SQL with BigQuery, but what's awesome is the new data connector for BigQuery, and this is getting better and better. But it basically allows you to query data in BigQuery automatically from Google Sheets. So an editor window pops up, and you can write a SQL query, and then it will sync that data into a tab of your Google Sheet. So in this kind of solution, what I wanted to do was connect to data in BigQuery, and then use that data to automatically create a slide deck. I know I used to work on our cloud blog at Google, and so I was doing kind of like weekly reports of, actually I used the analytics add-on to do this, but weekly reports of all the different, blog posts that we posted and how they performed. And at the time, I did not automate my slide creation. I had created in Google Sheets the exact table I wanted so that when I would copy paste, it would just look perfect in the slide deck. But I still basically did the same thing every week. So I'm going to show you another option, which is to automate that. And so we have kind of this example sales data report that you might, constantly be making reports that focus on a specific customer or a specific region. And, this is a very, I hope no one ever has this as their real report, but these are basically kind of opportunity CRM type data that we're talking about for a specific customer in a region. So similar to mail merge, if you ever have used mail merge, you can sometimes take a report that you make over and over and distill it down into kind of the structure. Using these curly brackets to mark kind of some fields that we want to automatically replace. We can say, oh, we always have the account name and region, and some of the data that we want to put in there. So we can kind of pre-fill out a template slide deck. But then we need to somehow get the data in there. So here's a Google spreadsheet that's connected to BigQuery. So you can see here that it's connected to BigQuery. If I show you the query really quick, it's really simple. I'm just bringing in all the data from my opportunities table, and I'm filtering on a specific account in a specific region. And instead of putting that directly in the query, I can make it into a parameter and then point that parameter to a cell in my spreadsheet. So by updating a cell in my spreadsheet, it can update the query. And so I have a little tab. This is a little bit too maybe for like, I always make the sales reports, but then I'm out of office for a month, and so somebody else has to. So you can build this little, interactive UI where if I want to now make one for the Midwest region, I can just update my parameter cells, refresh my data, which actually can be automated, but I like to refresh it in person. And then I see my new data that comes in. And then I can generate a report by pressing this button, which is attached to an app script function. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go out and create this new slide deck. And it's actually over here like creating a chart. It's doing all these things automatically based on my app script and copying and pasting them into my new slide deck, and then it's actually deleting all of those extra tabs. So now I have a new report that has new data in it for the Midwest region. So I can show you a little bit of the code in the script editor. But it's just basically doing a few things. So it's taking that template report, it's making a copy of that template report, it's filling in, so you see that it's looking for these kind of like curly braced different fields, and copying in the actual account names from the data in BigQuery that we've brought into our sheet. And then we are inserting some images. I'm actually using, it's creating, so here's creating a chart. So it's inserting a chart and then doing all of the things it needs to do to the chart. It's also doing some calculation to find the top opportunities from all of the opportunities that have come in. So it does all of these things for you. And I think that's, yeah. So that's the code, and the code's actually available online too. So if you have this exact report, like I said, I hope you don't, you should go out and get it. Yeah, so I think that's what I wanted to show there. I'll go back to my slides. I do have a few gotchas. There's always gotchas. So specifically for the data connector, that is a feature currently in the G Suite business and enterprise accounts, also for education as well, but a Gmail account won't work with it. So everything I showed you in the first demo is free, other than Cloud Natural Language does have a free tier and you need an account. Same for this one, you need actually a G Suite business or enterprise account, otherwise when you try to connect to BigQuery, the menu item won't be there. And then also all of your querying with BigQuery or storing tables in BigQuery, there is a free tier again, but past a certain point there is a charge, so I like to let people know that. Data access is important. So sometimes at a company you might not have access to a BigQuery table, so you still kind of have to do that social networking and make sure you get added to IAM and the BigQuery project so that you have access to query that table. And then sometimes your data, like I said, might not even be in BigQuery, but if you imagine maybe you get a CSV file sent to you, or an email with a certain structure sent to you once a week that you end up pulling data out of, you can use the same principles. You can use the services and app script to actually take that data automatically and put it into a sheet and then do the same thing. So I like to show off the BigQuery connection because they're trying to make it easier and easier, but you can kind of use the same principles no matter where your data is coming from. All right, so I hope that this gave a few more examples of how Sheets can really do more than maybe you would have expected just by adding in kind of that extra layer of the dev platform. It's great for all of these things, including collaboration. And if you want to try out any of the code or read the blog posts, here are some links to those. So I'll let you take a picture if you're interested. All right, cool. And then this is my Twitter and Medium if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions about it. You can also, in the GitHub where the code is, you can make comments, and I can address them there too. But always happy to validate, like, get ideas on what you want to do with ML APIs and Sheets, or with BigQuery and Sheets, or with other parts of G Suite, because I'm always looking for real life examples. Oops. Oops. There we go. That is it.